10:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. 4 astronauts of Crew 2, Shane Kimbrough, Megan MacArthur, Aki Hoshide, and Thomas Pesquet, now safely returned to Earth.
The capsule plucked from the ocean by a recovery vessel. The astronauts will fly by helicopter back to the mainland. Wall Street begins November the way October ended, with record highs for the 3 major indices. The Dow up 104 points, NASDAQ gained 10. The S&P 500 4 points higher. America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Need to finish the job or start one the right way? Get the right stuff at East West Rental Center. You can switch to easy mode using industrial strength equipment. With years of experience helping builders, East West Rental gives you exactly what you need. Tools for landscaping, concrete, lifts, trucks, tables, tents, chairs, water blasters, excavators, forklifts, air compressors, and more. Call East West Rental Center at 646-1463 or visit them in Upper Tumont. Open Monday to Saturday from 7 to 5, Sundays 8 to 5.
More subpoenas Monday from the House committee probing the January 6th violence at the U.S. Capitol.
The House Select Committee's list includes 6 people who, at the time of the riot, had close ties to former President Donald Trump. Notable among them, former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, William Stepien, the Trump 2020 campaign manager, Jason Miller, a senior campaign advisor, and former NYPD Commissioner Bernard Carrick, who is said to have paid for hotel rooms to be used as command centers ahead of January 6th. Committee Chair Benny Thompson, a Mississippi Democrat, said these and other witnesses can shed light on who any White House contacts were, and also who paid for it all. Colonel Scott. Fox News.
A global trade organization, the International Trade Union Confederation, has joined a list of human rights advocates challenging the propriety of China holding the 2022 Winter Olympic Games. It also singled out the International Olympic Committee for acquiescing in the face of alleged genocide and crimes against humanity reportedly taking place in China. The IOC says it's a sports body and not responsible for China's internal politics. A suspected serial killer's been arrested in Missouri.
The FBI says 25-year-old Paris Reed shot at least 6 people with the same .40 caliber gun. 4 of his victims died. Agents say they arrested Reed on a train in Independence, Missouri, as he was returning from Kansas City, Kansas to St. Louis. They say he shot and killed 2 people during that KC trip. The FBI says Reed had the gun used in the killings on him when he was arrested. They also say they are attempting to link Reed to more killings. Police not saying how the shootings are connected. Gary Baumgarten, Fox News.
A last-minute 40-yard field goal propels the Pittsburgh Steelers to a 29-27 win over the Chicago Bears in Monday Night Football. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at GuamAutospot.com.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So here we go again. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. We got a big Supreme Court case coming up. It's already been argued. We could expect a decision probably this spring. I'll be talking about that for the next 6 shows. I have an article that has run in the Federalist, and it's titled 6 Things We Just Learned About the Supreme Court's Gun Rights Case. So rather than do the whole article at one time, I'll break it down into 6 pieces. Here's the intro. Last week, the U.S. Supreme Court heard oral arguments in the first gun rights case to reach the High Court in more than a decade. The case, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, concerns the constitutionality of New York's law banning the carrying of handguns outside the home for self-defense absent a license, something the state will only issue if the applicant establishes a unique need for self-defense. For an overview of a more in-depth analysis of both the case and the current state of Second Amendment jurisprudence is available. But for 6 takeaways from the argument, let's start with item number 1. New York concedes the Second Amendment secures an individual's right to bear arms outside the home. This is big. Now, the Second Amendment, as you know from listening to me read it every day, says that the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Well, we've got a couple of cases talking about the right to keep arms. That would be District of Columbia versus Heller and McDonald versus Chicago. And both of them say that you have a right to keep a firearm in your house for self-protection. But they don't say that you can stick that firearm in your belt or your pocket or whatever, sling it over your shoulder and walk out of your house and walk down to the nearest 7-Eleven to buy a quart of milk. That's not what the cases have held. And lower courts have restricted that right to, quote, bear arms, as have many state statutes and city ordinances. So this is huge. New York concedes the Second Amendment secures an individual's right to bear arms outside the home. When the individual New Yorkers challenging the law, Robert Nash and Brandon Koch, along with New York State Rifle and Pistol Association, first asked the Supreme Court to hear their appeal, they sought to entice the High Court to take the case by stressing how important the underlying constitutional principle at issue is, writing, perhaps the single most important unresolved Second Amendment question remaining after Heller and McDonald established the individual right to bear arms is, quote, whether the Second Amendment secures the individual's right to bear arms for self-defense where confrontations often occur outside the home. Not only was that question unanswered by the Supreme Court in Heller and McDonald, but after Heller and McDonald, the lower courts disagreed on the scope of the Second Amendment outside of one's house. But last Monday's argument made the issue a non-issue, with New York conceding the question. The history is so clear that New York no longer contests that carrying a handgun outside of the home for purposes of self-defense is constitutionally protected activity. Paul Clement, the attorney arguing on behalf of the petitioners challenging the state's restrictive licensing law, stressed during oral argument. Now, the fact that the parties agree on something doesn't necessarily mean that that's the rule that the Supreme Court is going to adopt. It makes it easier, but it doesn't necessarily follow. Okay, so next, tomorrow we'll go to whether the right to bear arms is a right or privilege. And now we go straight to Zemi Ikotny. Now, the editorial writers over at the Daily News are probably attempting to bait me into giving them the blue star today because they've used one of my favorite words, but they're not using it properly, so it doesn't count. Here's what the Daily News says. Our view, bill to provide more transparency is good. Senator Tello Tigui recently introduced a bill that would make public disclosure of quarterly staffing patterns and personnel reports more transparent. In other words, you could see through the reports, apparently. Instead of printing them on paper, they're going to print them on some form of clear plastic, I guess, so you can see through them.
It's advanced.
In her announcement about the plan Sunday, Tigui explained that a multitude of Freedom of Information Act and information requests from the public and media have plagued this government seeking information that should be public in the first place. I agree. We regularly call upon agencies at informational hearings asking basic questions that should have been included. Unfortunately, most people cannot make heads or tails of the quarterly reports submitted. While we object to the description of public requests for public information from individuals who are paid to conduct business on behalf of the public as a plague, we applaud the senator's efforts to make information more transparent. Nobody ever accused Tello of being a literary genius. The more available information is, the easier it is to obtain, the less work government bureaucrats will have to do locating and copying that information. The bill would require all agencies, autonomous and semi-autonomous agencies, public corporations, football pools, Christmas collections, and other public instrumentalities of all branches of the government of Guam to post staffing patterns of the agency for each fiscal year quarter. The staffing patterns would include the employee's name, employment status, such as full-time or part-time, classified or unclassified, permanent or limited term, salary, benefits, increments that are payable within the next year, and the funding source for each position. Well, that's kind of most of that information is already available. The bill also requires the staffing pattern to be posted on a website and transmitted to the legislature in the Office of Public Accountability. Now, when you say the staffing pattern should be posted on a website, then you're talking real transparency. I've gone through this before, but it bears repeating. Let's use the analogy of a building. And let's say that inside that building there are some plaques that have information written on them that people are interested in seeing. Transparency would mean that those plaques would be in the show window of that building. So you could just casually walk by the building, turn your head and look and read those plaques. That's transparency. Oftentimes transparency means, well, if you want to read the plaques, you have to go through the door. And once you go through the door, the front door, then you can read the plaques. But in order to go through the front door, you have to submit something in writing. So it's kind of like you have to have a key to get to the front door, and we're just going to make it difficult for you to get the key. That's not transparency. The example of the plaques in the show window is, so if this information is posted on a website, so anybody with any form of digital device, or even a phone, could go to it and get that information, then we've got real transparency. The bill also requires a staffing pattern to be posted on a website and transmitted to the legislature and the Office of Public Accountability. Unfortunately, the bill specifies that data should be submitted in PDF format, which is far less useful for analysis than other formats, like any one of the spreadsheets, as an example, or even Microsoft Word, so you can copy and paste out of that document. PDF, not much you can do. It turns into a typing exercise if you want to get the information from it. In addition to the quarterly reports, the bill would require agencies to post monthly all new hires and terminations of employees and dates of their personnel actions. Aren't those personnel matters? All salary changes that are unrelated to regularly scheduled increments, including promotions and demotions, merit bonuses that are paid, including the paid date, permanent and temporary interagency transfers, a list of employees who were rehired under any reemployment rights, a list of employees who have reserved parking places at the agency, a list of the make and model of the car of those employees, a list of all agencies who store coffee cups in the kitchen of the agency, the size of the cup. Yeah, these monthly reports would be posted online and submitted to the legislature and Office of Public Accountability each month. For lawmakers who are analyzing where money is spent and what funds are being used to pay for what positions, these reports would provide a clear picture of government finances and obligations. Monthly reports involving employees who are rehired under reemployment rights, which include rights under the law or administrative or court order reinstatements, would likewise provide insight into how agencies deal with employees. This could be very useful for lawmakers. Even more important, this information could provide insight to the public, the people who are ultimately paying the salaries and footing the bills. Regular requests for public information, far from plaguing a government, should show that citizens of a community are engaged and interested in what their government is doing. After all, the agencies operate on behalf of the people in the name of the people. The people should know what's going on. They should know where their money is being spent and who's spending it. The Senator's bill, co-sponsored by Senators Paris, Brown, Ada, and Blas, could help lawmakers and citizens have a better understanding of their government. Yeah, well, you know, that's great. My hat's off to Tello. That's salutary legislation. Okay, then what we've got from the Post. This is titled, Will COVID-19 Restrictions Be Eased for Holiday Season? Here's the first sentence. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. Not really. To say the Guamanians are suffering from COVID-19 fatigue would be an understatement. On social media, people are posting photos and videos recalling the high spirits of Christmas past. So knowing the governor and her advisors are looking at numbers, they're making a list and they're checking it twice, Jose.
She's already made that naughty list.
Yeah, she already knows who's being naughty. The nice part, she's not that interested in. And allowing some respite from social gathering restrictions is a Christmas wish we all hope will be granted. That's going back again to my piece on the Second Amendment. Are we dealing here with rights or privileges? Don't we have a right to the pursuit of happiness? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It's not a privilege that the people in charge can say, we're going to make things really tough on you, you undeserving whelps. And if you show us that you have some merit, if you're not completely useless, if you're not just a basket of deplorables, then we might allow you to have some enjoyment. We may give you some privileges. It's kind of the way this sounds here, doesn't it?
We're going to take it off your permanent record.
Yeah. Most people will understand that even with eased restrictions, they should continue to wear masks. I won't understand that. That's for sure.
Blame genetics.
Wash their hands frequently and practice social distancing to slow, if not stop, the spread of Wuhan virus. There's no clear path in terms of how to deal with the novel coronavirus, also known as the Wuhan virus, that has pushed our island and the world's health, economy, and education system into a rut. The Guam Department of Public Health and Social Services asked the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for help in determining the factors in Guam's high Wuhan virus numbers in spite of having one of the nation's highest vaccination rates. No! Not only are people who are vaccinated getting ill, but they're dying. Something doctors have said is likely tied to our community's high levels of comorbidities, including obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. On top of worrying about health and safety and that of our children and elderly family members and colleagues for nearly 2 years now, there's been stress of worrying about jobs, whether or not kids will be okay learning online from home while we're at work, and a plethora of other concerns that wreak havoc on our mental and emotional health. The governor, when asked last week about the possibility of lifting restrictions with holidays coming up, said, "That's always a discussion. If we had it my way, I would open the whole island. Our people really want to beat this virus. If she had it her way." I forgot to unload my sayings here.
If only she was governor.
I actually got him right here. I think we have an addition to great pronouncements. You'll recall attorney Vanessa Williams. It's impossible to separate our choice of whether and when to have children from every other choice in our lives. Vanessa Williams. Chief Steve Ignacio. I have no information, even from the get-go, that there was a cover-up in this crash. Yeah. And this is from the governor. We are transparent and accountable to the people. We are transparent with reports, meetings, minutes. As far as I'm concerned, we're following everything that we're required to. And she also said, I think the route to go is to get out there and let's vote for it, the governor said, later adding, if I had my way, I would vote tomorrow and I would only work with native inhabitants. Well, we got an addition. If I had it my way, I would open the whole island. What's stopping her? It's kind of like that meme we saw where somebody reminded Joe Biden that he was the president of the United States. But Joe, you're the president. Oh, yeah, yeah. Oh, you're right. I am the president.
Come on, man.
Yeah, come on, man. So how about this one? Come on, Lou. You are the governor. You
It's
have
always
it your way. Yeah. Yeah, you know, you could stock your refrigerator government house with nothing but food from Burger King because you always have it your way. She also raised a point where we've not yet, as an island or nation, figured out, quote, there comes a point where we have to start thinking, this is a virus that we're going to have to live with. And how do we transition to that? No! Really, Governor? You know, you don't listen to talk radio, that's for sure. Ray's been saying that ever since. I've tipped my hat to it myself. You know, especially when you look at some of the numbers, the number of people that die from the Wuhan virus is minuscule. You know, it's much more dangerous to jump in your car and drive down here from home than it is to be exposed to the virus. And the thing that kills, and you don't have to be an epidemiologist to figure this out, most of the people that die from Wuhan virus don't have very long lifespans anyhow because they have these, what we euphemistically label as comorbidities. They're overweight, they're diabetic, they have heart disease, they've got all of the diseases of civilization, the non-contagious lifestyle diseases. So, you know, we're all going to die. Even hosts of tall tales are going to die. Of course, we want it to occur as late as possible, but the more comorbidities that you have and the less you deal with them, the sooner you're going to die. So if we were to extract the numbers of people who died from Wuhan virus that didn't have comorbidities, I expect it would be an extremely small number. I'm not going to repeat Andrew Camacho's test again, but
I was going to say, like those who fall off a cliff, get eaten by sharks,
yeah,
and had taken some poison.
Yeah, and then they recover the nose, and the nose tests positive for Wuhan. Yeah. Dr. Nathaniel Berg, the chairperson of the governor's Physicians Advisory Group, confirmed officials are working on an actionable plan for the governor to weigh, and that could lead to increasing the number of guests allowed at holiday parties, both in restaurants and private homes. It will also ease the requirement of closing all chimneys so that Santa Claus can't bring the virus in while delivering gifts. Any easing of restrictions will be contingent on corresponding improvements in the Wuhan virus situation on island, he said. Although a number of data sets will be tracked, according to Berg, the main areas of focus are available beds at Guam Memorial, better adoption of available Wuhan virus treatments, the rollout of pediatric vaccines, and more residents receiving vaccine booster doses. All right, those are big things. And then as we continue to see our numbers at least stabilized, we are encouraged to think that it won't be too long before the governor is able to make a decision to perhaps remove the mandate for restaurants, perhaps increase the number of people who can socialize, Berg told the Post, and that all those things would have to be sort of one step at a time. See that everything goes well, move to the next step. Perhaps the government can look at another educational campaign to help the island move forward, even as we wait for DPHSS and CDC team to help figure out how we beat, or at least learn to live with Wuhan virus. You know, we must be, either we're way, way ahead of the mainland, or we're way, way behind the mainland. Because I just came back, and you know, most of the mainland, you don't see anybody wearing masks, and you don't see anybody doing the social distancing. And some of the states have numbers that are much lower than ours. Now, of course, if you get to California, no one has done a population count of the Karens in California, but because there are so many Karens there, they do pay some attention to the thing, to the masks and the rest of it. But we're either way ahead of the rest of the country or way, way behind. Last year, the government launched a Strive for 5 initiative, a call for action for the community to lower the Wuhan virus area risk score to 5, which would result in relaxing of pandemic restrictions. As of the most recent update, Guam's CAR score is 9. However, the virus has created variants that have complicated matters, and the governor won't have to look at that one data point to make her decision. Berg said the advisory group expects to present the governor with a plan as soon as possible. Ultimately, the data has to support relaxing restrictions, the governor said, noting some optimism as the number of hospitalizations as well as daily confirmed cases decrease. I think it's going to, she said last week. That's my hope. We're hoping the same thing, Governor. The people of Guam sorely need this respite. Yeah, so once again, the real teachable moment here is this. The governor said, when asked last week about the possibility of lifting restrictions with the holidays coming up, the governor said, that's always a discussion. If I had my way, I would open the whole island. Yeah. Okay, it's Blue Star time. The Daily News, once again, you know, they're on the right side of the issue. There's a call to action. They laid it out. It was an understandable opinion. So, here we go. Blue Star goes to the Daily News again. And that takes the Daily News up to 70. Post, you had a golden opportunity here when the governor came out with that, if I had my way, and you gave her a pass on it. You just put it down like, you know, like, I'm going to give everybody on the island $1,000. And you just printed it, well, okay, that's what she said. You just let it go. You don't get blue stars that way. You have to engage in some provocative writing from time to time if you want to get that blue star. Guam Daily Post. You used to be pretty good at it. I think you kind of lost your mojo or something. Okay, let's take a short break and we'll come back to the card.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Hapude, konnichiwa,
Patois, ciao. Enter for a chance to win the 76 Circle K World Cuisine Giveaway. Be one of 3 lucky winners to win a passport of free food from around the world at over 15 different local restaurants. Just stop by any 76 Circle K, purchase $35 or more in fuel to get an entry form. Drive by today and taste the world with 76 Circle K's World Cuisine Giveaway. Visit 76circlekguam.com for more details. Some conditions apply. Circle K, take it easy.
And now, back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the one radio show politicians don't want you to listen to. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, so here's the card for today. I start out with PNC versus journalism, a bout we've had on the card before. And this gets into Yankee Doodle versus Brandon and Caroline Products versus Insular cases. I've got Lebowski versus Boards, John B. versus Clint, which was on the card yesterday, but we got a little bit more to talk about on that one. So starting out, and by the way, I didn't get into homework yesterday. Yeah, so we're going to get into homework maybe right after the halftime show, so I don't forget this time, Jose, if you can remind me.
I'll be the kid that kills it for everybody.
There you go.
You forgot the homework, Teach?
Yeah. Okay, have a nice time. See you later. See you
Wait. You forgot the homework. You said 5 pages?
Yeah, very good, Jose. Okay, so Jose, you're kind of mentioned in this next item on the card.
Oh.
Yeah, so early this morning, I got an email from none other than Neil Weir. Yeah, and here's what he said. Robert, tomorrow is a really big day as the Supreme Court will hear arguments on whether the denial of SSI to citizens in U.S. territories is unconstitutional. We're trying to make sure the Supreme Court and Congress don't forget this is about real people's lives. So I've launched a new campaign to elevate the stories of people from each of the territories. Check it out. As always, thanks for your support. Man, if I'm one of his supporters, I'd hate to see the ones that are derogatory. And he signs it Neil. And here's the campaign. Quote, I am Jose. Campaign launched as Supreme Court considers U.S. versus Jose L. Valle Madero. Did you give them permission to use? No.
I did not. And I blame the insular cases.
Yeah. Well, maybe you want to get together with Tello. Maybe she could introduce a bill about not using people's names if you don't have permission to use their names. Yeah. So here's how it goes. Tomorrow, the Supreme Court will hear arguments in the United States versus Jose Luis Valle Madero, a case that will have broad implications for 3.5 million citizens living in the territories, 98% of whom are racial or ethnic majorities. Now, this is really important. And this is classic Neil Weir. You know, he's coming along talking about being Mr. Equal Protection, right? And he's always got to play the race card. 98% of the people in the territories are ethnic minorities. Yeah. So
Wait, 98%?
Yeah.
That sounds like a majority.
It does. 98% are a minority. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to stop there for a moment, but I'll come back to this. But before I go further, I want to read PNC News that popped up on their website today. Tomorrow, November 10, the Supreme Court will hear arguments in the United States versus Jose Luis Valle Madero, a case that will have broad implications for 3.5 million citizens living in territories, 98% of whom are racial or ethnic minorities. Does that sound familiar? The PNC article goes on to say, 2 courts have already ruled in the case that the denial of supplemental security income benefits to citizens in the territories based solely on their place of residence violates the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection. Now, let me go back to Neil's letter here. 2 courts have already ruled in the case that the denial of supplemental security income benefits to citizens in the territories based solely on their place of residence violates the Constitution's guarantee of equal protection. So I won't bore you with more of this responsive reading, but they just took Neil Weber's letter and added a couple words at the beginning and turned it into a news story. And it doesn't say press release at the end. If you can see this on Facebook, this is the front of the article. You see the PNC logo there? Yeah, and then you go down a little bit, or you go to this side a little bit. Equally American. Neil, this is his logo, Neil Weir's logo.
I'm concerned that he didn't write a personal letter to you like it sounded like.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of catfishing you there, Bob.
Well, he is. Ordinarily, you would expect him to pay for this.
Oh, yeah.
Because this is basically...
Sounds like an ad.
This is basically an ad. It is not news. It does not attribute it. And here's the attribution. November 9, 2021, by Pacific News Center. So they're claiming that they created it themselves. Yeah, that's what they're saying. Yeah. You know, going back to homework.
That's plagiarism, right?
It is. It's plagiarism. And going back to being the kid that spoils everything for everyone, when the teacher says, "Little Johnny, oh, that was such a good paper that you wrote." Jose stands up and says, "Teacher, he copied it from the book."
I am Jose.
Yeah. And that's exactly what they did. It's plagiarism. Blatant, out-and-out plagiarism, passing off what Neil Weir sent them as a news story. And then emblazoned on the Supreme Court are the words "equal justice under law." The oral arguments in Valle Madero will put a test to whether these words mean the same thing for citizens in the territories. And by the way, SSI is not available only to citizens. If you're a lawful permanent resident, you are eligible for it. It's not something that turns on citizen or non-citizen.
I'm just confused of why there's a campaign hinging on a U.S. Supreme Court decision, because they don't go by what the polls going on outside or how many protesters are holding signs up or signatures on a website to make their decision.
They don't even listen to tall tales. Yeah. So... So if you follow Neil Weir along, he's got to raise funds for his nonprofit, right? So this is not directed toward the Supreme Court.
Nope.
This is directed to people who have checkbooks. All you folks living out in the territories, I'm fighting for you.
It takes a lot to send these letters out.
Yeah, I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting for the people in America and Samoa who do not have birthright citizenship, even though they don't want it. So, you know, this propagandizing is necessary to make that work. Now, he's saying that supplemental security benefits to citizens based solely on their place of residence violates a guarantee of equal protection. That's not what the court cases have said. You know, it's a gross oversimplification that fits nicely into his propaganda sheet. So, obviously, you can't trust anything that comes out of PNC. This is not the first time we've caught them doing it. Up until now, they've always put the word Neil Weir's press release at the end of the article, which most people probably don't even notice. This time, they just claimed it as their own. So, yesterday... we kind of got into this a little bit with Yankee Doodle Media and how Let's Go Brandon became a rallying cry against news bias. So I think what we need to do, Jose, is we need to make up a bunch of signs that say, "Let's Go Brandon," and parade around in front of PNC, right? Because they're doing the same thing that Turley highlighted here.
www.imnotbrandon.org.
Yeah.
It's a campaign, Bob.
In a curious way, Let's Go Brandon has become a similarly unintended political battle cry. And then there's an explanation of how it arose. During the interview, NBC reporter Kelly Stavist's questions were drowned out by loud and clear chances of "flock Joe Biden." Stavis quickly and inexplicably declared, "You can hear the chants from the crowd. Let's go, Brandon." Stavis' denial or misinterpretation of the obvious instantly became a symbol of what many Americans perceive as a media bias in favor of the Biden administration. Indeed, some in the media immediately praised Stavis for her smooth save and being a quick-thinking reporter. But the episode was reminiscent of a reporter standing in front of burning buildings during last year's riots and calling them peaceful protests. I wonder if anybody down at PNC is looking for a job with CNN. Yeah, this is really blatant. And of course, they're not sticking up for Biden, but they are sticking up for a particular party line. It is an offshoot of the separatist party line, pretty well concealed, but coming from the same well. So let's see, I had another article here. It must be in my pack about yeah, unfortunately, I don't think I got it. Yeah, I'll have to pick that up tomorrow. The carotene products case really tells you what the Supreme Court case is dealing with. So I'll get into that tomorrow. Let's take a short break here.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Yeah, so, okay, I'm going to come back to carotene products and the case before the Supreme Court on SSI tomorrow. Unfortunately, I don't have the paper with me that I needed. Once again, I forgot it. Okay, next item on the card here is Lebowski versus, oh, wait a minute, I do have it. My bad, I just attached it to the wrong item on the card. So forget everything I just said. I'm going to go back to carotene products. And I started this yesterday. This is an article that ran in Vox. The title of the article was "The Surprisingly High Stakes in a Supreme Court Case About $28,000." And yesterday I read the beginning of it, and let me pick it up again. Supplemental Security Income is a welfare program for many of the most vulnerable people in the nation, aged, blind, or disabled individuals who lack the means to support themselves. It's not an especially generous program. Maximum annual benefits for an eligible individual are currently little more than $9,500. But after the Valle Madero became seriously ill in 2011 and was unable to work, SSI was his lifeline against destitution. About a year later, after he started receiving SSI benefits, Valle Madero moved from New York to Puerto Rico so that he could be closer to family. For several years, the government continued to deposit his SSI checks in his bank account. But when Valle Madero filed for additional Social Security benefits in 2016, the government learned that he'd left the mainland for Puerto Rico, and Valle Madero learned for the first time that his decision to be with his family had catastrophic consequences. By law, SSI benefits are only available to people living in the 50 states and D.C. or the Northern Mariana Islands. Puerto Ricans are eligible for a program called Aid to the Aged, Blind, and Disabled, but this program pays only a small fraction of what Valle Madero received under SSI. Puerto Rico residents receive an average monthly payment of $58 under AABD, while under SSI, an estimated 354,000 Puerto Rico residents would receive an average monthly benefit of $418. Then a year after Valle Madero lost his benefits, I gotta silence this machine here. The federal government sued him, demanded that he repay $28,081 in SSI benefits received since he relocated. So that's the foundations of the case here. The guy was living in New York. He was eligible for SSI. Whether or not he was a citizen is not material. He could have been a permanent resident. Of course, he was from Puerto Rico, so he's a citizen. And when he moved from New York to Puerto Rico, he continued to receive the money. I suppose it was deposited in his same New York bank. And when the feds found out, they said, you got 28 grand that you got to pay back. That's what we expect government officials to do, right? Now, in defending the discriminatory treatment of Valle Madero and of similarly vulnerable Puerto Ricans, the Justice Department points to a legal rule known as, quote, the, quote, rational basis test. I've talked about that more than once. Strict scrutiny, intermediate scrutiny, and the rational basis test. And here's the part where Valle Madero becomes a difficult case. This rational basis test defines much of the relationship between an elected Congress and an unelected judiciary. It is the reason why much of the New Deal and the Great Society survived contact with the Supreme Court. Something liberals should love, right? Indeed, the rational basis test is probably the single most important check on judicial power, something that I'm in favor of, being one who has ranted and raved about critarchy on more than one occasion. It is not something to be cast aside lightly. Rational basis is not something to be cast aside lightly, especially in an era when the Supreme Court's conservative majority, supermajority, would love to get its hands on more power. Oh, that supermajority. Valle Madero's lawyers argue that this is one of the rare cases where the rational basis standard, which I will explain in more detail below, should not apply. They tell a story in their brief about Puerto Ricans were systemically denied the full rights of citizenship. And once again, it's not a matter that turns on citizenship. And how this denial justifies giving them heightened constitutional protection. So the Valle Madero case is a case about a very poor man who seeks only a pittance from the most powerful nation on earth, but it asks some of the most fundamental questions that a person can ask about their nation. Does the federal government owe certain obligations to all Americans, or can it vary those based on where someone lives? And is Valle Madero suffering the price of democracy? Valle Madero is not the first time the Supreme Court considered whether it's constitutional to deny SSI benefits to people living in Puerto Rico. In Califano versus Torres, a 1978 case, the court rejected a similar lawsuit challenging the program's discrimination against Puerto Rican residents. Quote, we deal here with a constitutional attack upon a law providing for government payments of monetary benefits, the court explained in its unsigned opinion in Torres. Such a law, the opinion continued, is entitled to a strong presumption of constitutionality. As long as Congress's judgments are rational and not invidious, the legislature's efforts to tackle problems of the poor and the needy are not subject to a constitutional straitjacket. I'll bet you read this in Neil Weir's stuff more than once, right? Yeah. The judgment may seem cruel, but it is a product of one of Franklin Roosevelt's most hard-fought victories against a reactionary Supreme Court that actively pushed the poor and the vulnerable into desperation. For the first third of the 20th century and much of Roosevelt's early years as president, the Supreme Court routinely sabotaged progressive legislation, often relying on highly dubious legal reasoning in the process. Now, for you Supreme Court scholars, look up the word Lochner, L-O-C-H-N-E-R. This was the Lochner era of the Supreme Court. Lochner. The court struck down federal child labor laws. It invalidated minimum wage laws, stripped workers of their rights to unionize, and struck down laws prohibiting employers from overworking their employees. That's the Lochner case. Meanwhile, a series of cases involving Roosevelt's efforts to take the United States off the gold standard threatened to cause such widespread economic disruption. If the government had lost these cases, private debt would have increased by as much as 69%. And most of the railroads that the country relied on to ship goods could have gone bankrupt. That Roosevelt prepared a speech announcing that the government, when these things became apparent, Roosevelt prepared a speech announcing that the government would not obey the decision. In the end, the court blinked, the so-called switch in time that saved 9. Roosevelt's undelivered speech was filed away in an archive, and the court reversed course on many of its anti-worker decisions. It even upheld a new law protecting workers' rights to organize. A culmination of the court's turn toward restraint was United States versus Caroline Products, a 1938 case, which held that, with a handful of important exceptions, economic legislation is not to be pronounced unconstitutional in light of the facts made known or generally assumed. It is of such character as to preclude the assumption that it rests upon some rational basis within the knowledge and experience of legislators. So the Caroline Products case was the beginning of the rational basis test. And the court has already held once that, okay, let's break for halftime and we'll come back to Caroline Products.
Is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Arguing to keep the mandate. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Justice Department submitting briefs with the Fifth Circuit Federal Appeals Court, arguing it should not make permanent an order staying the president's vaccine mandate for companies employing at least 100 people, arguing that possibly hundreds of people per day could die without the mandate. The private sector order takes effect January 4th. Monday was the last day for federal workers to get vaccinated to beat a deadline later this month, triggering some protests.
No one should be forced to take a medical treatment just to keep their job. from NASA workers in Mississippi to prison guards around the country.
I think basically it comes down for distrust.
Federal workers ordered to be fully vaccinated by November 22nd. Some agencies report sky-high numbers of workers declining the shot or refusing to report their vaccine status.
Fox's William Longinus. Most restrictions are now lifted. The U.S. is welcoming vaccinated air travelers from Canada, Mexico, and much of Europe once again. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo.
The airlines have their protocol in place to ensure that. Making sure that everyone's vaccinated and tested takes the guesswork out of it. People feel safe. You have to wear your mask. And so I think that's why this is such an important day. And because people feel safe, that's why you're starting to see the booking surge.
The lawsuits have begun for Friday's music festival tragedy in Houston.
Multiple lawsuits have been filed against several defendants, including Astroworld Festival founder and performer rapper Travis Scott and concert promoters Live Nation and score more. 8 people, including 2 teens, were killed when crowds surged toward the stage, crushing and trampling them, while hundreds of others were hurt on Friday night. While Scott paused multiple times while spotting fans who needed medical attention, he completed his set. He later released a statement saying he didn't realize how out of control things had gotten and that he was, quote, devastated by the tragedy.
America is listening to Fox News.
When's the last time you looked at your homeowner's insurance?
We buy a homeowner's policy and never give it another thought until something happens. Life brings changes, and our coverage needs can change. The smart thing to do is get the answers and level up our insurance to make sure we're totally protected.
That's the Insurance Extra Point. Get out there and make something good happen today by calling Guahan Insurance Services at 475-1162 or visit us at the Camacho Landmark Center in Tamuning.
Mitsubishi and used cars, like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage, as low as $127 per paycheck, 0 down. Or this 2021 Buick Encore, as low as $237 per paycheck, 0 down for 72 months. Call 478-AUTO to schedule a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
An accused Russian ransomware hacker has been arrested in Poland. The U.S. now trying to get its hands on him.
Charging a Ukrainian national for alleged roles in the R-Evil cyber gang linked to ransomware attacks on a number of U.S. companies and utilities, including tech firm Kaseya. U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland says Yaroslav Wazinski was arrested in Poland.
Wazinski's arrest demonstrates how quickly we will act alongside our international partners to identify, locate, and apprehend alleged cyber criminals.
Wazinski's ransom demands totaled more than $760 million. Eben Brown, Fox News.
A successful splashdown in the Gulf of Mexico late Monday night for space station crew members who returned to Earth aboard the SpaceX Crew capsule after more than 6 months in space. A pair of strong earthquakes have shaken Nicaragua in the last several hours, the latest 6.2 magnitude, just hours after a 5.8 magnitude quake near the country's Pacific coastline. A man shot and wounded during last summer's civil unrest in Kenosha, Wisconsin, testifying Monday in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial.
Gage Grosskreutz, one of the men shot by then 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse, told jurors he feared for his life, that Rittenhouse had shot 2 men and Grosskreutz thought he was next. But an attorney for Rittenhouse pointed out to Grosskreutz, who was at the police protest, he said as a paramedic, that one of the men Rittenhouse killed had been hitting him first with a skateboard.
You believe in this picture, one of the reasons you wanted to intervene was you believed that Mr. Rittenhouse was in danger of being seriously hurt, right?
In part, yes.
Rittenhouse's attorney pointed out that Grosskreutz was armed himself for protection, which is why they argue that Rittenhouse was armed as well. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Leah Dunca from Security Title here with a little information about trusts. A trust is a legal entity capable of owning property. It can protect property from issues such as lawsuits or divorce and can be used to distribute property and avoid probate. Many trusts start as revocable but become irrevocable when the initial trustees die. Work with your estate planning attorney to see if a trust is a good fit for your family property. Call the professionals at Security Title. We are here to help.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Guam Auto Spot has the best selection in Buick, GMC, Mitsubishi, and used cars like the 2021 Mitsubishi Mirage starting at $127 per paycheck. Zero down. Call 671-478-AUTO to take a test drive or get pre-approved online at guamautospot.com.
Okay, so we're back here, and I understand we we lost our radio signal for a little while, so I probably ought to cover some of the stuff that everybody missed except Jose, lucky Jose.
I could use a second round.
And that deals with a case called United States versus Caroline Products. And it is, according to this article that I'm reading here, actually the fulcrum upon which the SSI case before the Supreme Court is going to turn, notwithstanding Neil Ware's propagandizing of the issues in the case. And the key here in this Caroline Products case, which arose during the New Deal and it was a dramatic shift in Supreme Court's interpretation of statutes and its relationship with the United States Congress. And in the Caroline Products case, this is what the United States Supreme Court said. We deal here with a constitutional attack upon a law providing for governmental payments of monetary benefits. Such a law is entitled to a strong presumption of constitutionality. Excuse me. As long as Congress's judgments are rational and not frivolous, not invidious, the legislature's efforts to tackle the problems of the poor and the needy are not subject to a constitutional straitjacket. So that was Caroline Products, and that was the ratio decidendi for a case called Torres versus Califano, which I may be able to find here in this paper. This whole matter of SSI in Puerto Rico has been before the Supreme Court before, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of against people getting the SSI. So let's see, here it is. In Califano versus Torres, a 1978 case, the Supreme Court rejected a similar lawsuit challenging the program's discrimination against Puerto Rican residents. Quote, "We deal here with a constitutional attack upon a law providing for governmental payments of monetary benefits. Such a law is entitled a strong presumption of constitutionality as long as the Congress's judgments are rational and not invidious. The legislature's efforts to tackle the problems of the poor and the needy are not subject to a constitutional straitjacket." So, in other words, it's the rational basis that I've explained before. If a lawyer could explain to the court a possibly rational basis for an act of Congress, then the law will not be declared unconstitutional under normal circumstances, even if there's no proof that even a single member of Congress thought that way when they enacted the law. So here we're dealing with the law that gives money to some people and not to others. And we all know the reason that it goes to not the others is because the others live in jurisdictions that don't pay into the federal treasury. And the Congress has said that's a rational basis. The argument has also been advanced that if Puerto Rico were included, the cost to the treasury would be immense. And I read some figures here a little bit earlier in this article. There are potentially 354,000 people in Puerto Rico that could be eligible at $418 a month. So do the math. That's a pretty good sized chunk of money. On Guam, I think we're talking something like 30,000 people. So you may not like it. You may not agree with it. But under the rational basis test, the only thing that the Supreme Court has to conclude is, yes, there is a rational basis for doing this. It's not an invidious discrimination. We are not going to tell the Congress of the United States how to enact laws. So there is a case for judicial intervention, and it goes like this. Although Caroline Products held that the court should begin every constitutional case with a presumption in favor of democracy, deferring to elected legislatures in nearly all cases, it did lay out a few exceptions to this rule. If a law violates a specific prohibition of the Constitution, such as the right to free speech or the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures, then it should be struck down. So too should laws that undermine democracy itself, such as voter suppression laws or partisan gerrymanders, although the Roberts Court has largely abandoned this pro-democracy prong of Caroline. Additionally, Caroline Products said that laws rooted in prejudice against discrete and insular minorities are also constitutionally suspect and should ordinarily be struck down. Such laws, the courts explained, are suspect because they tend to curtail the operation of those political processes ordinarily to be relied upon to protect minorities. If a minority group is transferred into a legal underclass like African Americans in the Jim Crow South, then they are unlikely to wield enough political power to lobby for the repeal of laws that disfavor them. The last prong of the Caroline Products framework forms the bulk of Valle Madero's legal argument. The Constitution forbids the government from denying any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. As the court explained in City of Claiborne versus Claiborne Living Center, this equal protection clause primarily protects groups that have experienced a history of purposeful unequal treatment or been subjected to unique disabilities on the basis of stereotyped characteristics not truly indicative of their abilities. Thus, courts view discrimination on the basis of characteristics like race and gender with great skepticism, because racial minorities and women have historically faced the kind of equal treatment described in Claiborne. It's interesting that this comes up because I read in another article that 80% of the people in Puerto Rico claim to be white. Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam were all annexed by the United States as part of the Spanish-American War, and this annexation produced a political crisis in the minds of the racist leaders who still dominated American politics. Many American elites, including members of Congress, Supreme Court justices, etc., view these people in the new territories as too alienated from American culture. Then there's a reference to the insular cases. And finally, which we don't need to spend much time on, I think we pretty well understand the insular cases. So how should this case turn out? The government's strongest arguments against Valle Madero is that while residents of Puerto Rico bear some resemblance to other groups that have been afforded special protection under the Constitution, it's not a perfect fit. The Equal Protection Clause, the DOJ notes, prohibits the government from denying equal rights to any person. It has been ordinarily understood to prevent unequal treatment of classes of persons, not unequal treatment of regions. SSI's exclusion for people living in Puerto Rico does not disable people of Puerto Rican descent from receiving SSI benefits. Valle Madero received those benefits when he lived on the mainland. Similarly, a white Nebraskan who moves to Puerto Rico would also be ineligible for SSI. A similar concern animated the court's decision in Torres, the 1978 decision denying SSI benefits to people in Puerto Rico. A court decision requiring equal benefits for all Americans, regardless of where they live, would apply with equal force to any benefits a state might provide its residents, and would require a state to continue to pay those benefits indefinitely to any person who had once resided there. And there's also good reason why liberals and leftists should recoil from a court decision requiring the same legal rules to be applied to every American, regardless of where they live. The court's decision in Shelby County versus Holder, which stuck down a provision of the Voting Rights Act imposing special obligations on states with history of racist election procedures, was rooted in similar concerns that rules in one part of the country should be the same as rules in other parts. Similarly, Democrats in Congress appear likely to pass legislation permitting poor people in states that refuse the Affordable Care Act's Medicaid extension to receive cost-free insurance through a different government program. But that means that a poor person in, say, Florida would receive different federal benefits than a poor person in Virginia. Such a regime would be vulnerable if the court determines that geographic discrimination can violate the Constitution. It's easy to see, in other words, how a conservative Supreme Court could wield a legal doctrine requiring geographic equality to do considerable violence to progressive legislation. Well, we can't have that. Carotene Products' core insight is that an unelected judiciary should not be distrusted with too much power. We saw in the court's early 20th century decisions how democracy can spin off its axis if courts are too powerful. The rational basis test exists to prevent that from happening again. Ultimately, the correct answer to the Valle Madero comes down to an extraordinarily difficult question. Mr. Valle Madero is a victim of terrible injustice. The question is whether, if a conservative Supreme Court steps in to cure that injustice, it can be trusted not to seize even more power in the process. This is a really good article. This is certainly not the kind of stuff you get from Neil Weir and his 98% minorities. Yeah, okay, so let's see. I got a couple of folks here in the green room that want to talk about this, I guess. I've got Another Joe and Repeat. Okay, Another Joe wants to talk about a current tax code, and Repeat wants to talk about Neil Weir. So I'm going to go with Repeat and then come back to Another Joe. Good afternoon, Repeat.
Good afternoon, Uncle Bob. You know, context really matters. I have a few points I want to talk about Neil Weir, but the first point is context really matters. And I've always been saying it. Neil Weir, you know, has an affliction of saviorism, and the more I listen to him and hear about what he's doing, the more I am convinced that he is either incapable or unwilling to listen to the people that he purports to save. I say that because every time you hear him speak, he will address in the beginning sort of a disclaimer like, oh, yeah, I know there are people who are concerned that this will affect their rights. All I know is that, but that's just, you know, hogwash. I know better. So what I've taken away from that is Neil Weir is not concerned about the people he purports to save. He's more concerned about his legacy. And that's why I've dubbed him before a modern-day Salvatores, because Salvatores really came to the Marianas because he wanted to secure his place in history and legacy, right? So the other point I would point out about Neil Weir is that, you know, recently with the legislation that extends SSI to Guam and the other territories, you know, it's proof positive that he was barking up the wrong tree, taking it into the court system. You know, it's a political question. It's something that should be solved by politics, by legislatures. You know, that's I think, you know, one of the key points in what you were talking about previously. And then I guess the last thing I would say, you know, is that we just got to be very careful, because when you take the approach that Neil Weir is taking, you know, you got to really understand the you know, reality and how Congress will take that. If you force their hand through the courts, they're more likely to say, okay, you want $30 million Guam worth of SSI benefits? Well, okay, that's fine. We'll give you those. But now all that other stuff that we were giving you free of charge, you know, because of the principle, we're going to make you now pay us the $500 million a year in federal income tax and other kinds of taxes that we normally, you know, wouldn't ask you to pay for. So you got to look at what the trade-off is going to be. If you upset Congress, they'll say, yeah, we'll give you $30 million, but you owe us $500 million. So there you go. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and Weir has never, ever once got into the idea that the reason that the Justice Department advances for no SSI in the territories is because they don't contribute to the federal treasury. He would just have you believe it's because they are black-hearted, bad people.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know if you saw that forum that he participated in. It was I guess on some resolution. The American Samoans, you could hear the contempt in their voice when they were talking about him. You know, about how dare this guy come along and try to decide for us, you know, our political future when nobody asked him, and even after we asked him, he still persists. And so that's the other reason why I said he's not worried about the people he's trying to affect. He's worried about his personal legacy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Thanks for letting me vent, Uncle Bob.
Well,
you know,
you're right on point, and you're always welcome on Tall Tales. You know that. Repeat, vent or no vent.
All right.
Thank you.
Repeat again.
All right. So yeah, Repeat makes some really good points there. It's kind of like I really don't care who wins the game, so long as I score a lot of points. That's what teamwork is all about, right? Yeah, I know I shouldn't be taking all those long jump shots, but I hit a lot of them, and you know, I really need the points in the box score. We lose games because I do it, but it's okay. All right, let's go and see what another Joe wants to talk about our tax situation, I think. Is that correct? In support of current tax code. All right, this is going to be a taxing conversation. I can see that now, another Joe, so go for it.
There you go, Bob. So I have to agree, perhaps they should, the the legislature of Puerto Rico should consider paying for this individual's Social Security, was it insurance, from their, what is it? They don't pay into the Treasury, right? So they have their own version of our Section 30 money. If I'm hearing it right, they're unincorporated. Is that right?
They don't have anything like Section 30 money. Puerto Rico is different from Guam. If you live in Puerto Rico, you pay Puerto Rican income tax on all your Puerto Rico source income. If you have mainland source income, then you pay U.S. income tax on that. If you work for the U.S. government, you pay U.S. income tax on that. So they make a contribution to the Treasury, but not as much as a state would. But there's no Section 30 money.
Are they unincorporated?
Yes, they are.
Possibly their legislature could find some solution for this particular individual, unless they're talking about a overall policy. It sounds like they're attempting to force an act of Congress, the hand of the Congress, with the Supreme Court decision, and but what it sounds like is Uncle Bob is being closer to an incorporated territory or some form of
incorporated, unincorporated don't really shed a whole light on this. If Puerto Rico were an incorporated territory, then the Constitution would apply ex proprio vigere, and everything that applies in the states would apply in the incorporated territory, including all the tax laws, all the tariff laws, all the rest of that stuff. That's why I pointed out that incorporated territories has all of the disadvantages of statehood, but none of the advantages.
Did you say before that Puerto Rico does or does not want to be a state?
Well, I understand that there's a strong statehood movement in Puerto Rico, but it's been a contentious issue. There are those in Puerto Rico who favor the current status, and there are those who favor statehood, and there are a handful of people that even wanted independent Puerto Rico.
Well, it's like you said, Uncle Bob. It sounds like it's an accounting issue. Paying into the Treasury has nothing to do with an ethnic issue, or it's pure and simple. It's an accounting issue. Where does what makes
Neil Weir, if he can, will make everything into an ethnic issue, right? 98% of the people in the territories are minorities. The other 2% are the majority. Neither group passed basic arithmetic when they went to school.
Yeah. Hey, Uncle Bob, thanks for your time. I just wanted to touch on something real quick, which has I don't know how you feel about bringing up Sanford Torres on the program, but the comment was made that he was just looking out for his legacy. From what I've read or heard, I believe he actually went to the Philippines and he was given other options. He decided to take a step down, come to basically a small little island that's irrelevant. Well, not irrelevant. It's small compared to the other opportunities he had, and he was connected to the Spanish monarchy. So it's not like he would have had a difficult time securing a legacy. He was, I think, the understanding is he was inspired to do the act to do the work of God here on Guam and in the Marianas, primarily, I guess, in Guam. So I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. Hey, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay. So let's take a short break here. Let's head for Wrigley Field in the seventh inning stretch.
The
Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training.
Hi, I'm Jerry Roberts, and every day on The Ray Gibson Show, I get to comment on the incredibly diverse, fun, challenging, sometimes frustrating, often exciting, but always interesting world of work. I hope you'll be there with us.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point. Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Okay, so here we are, Wrigley Field in Chicago. It's the 7th inning stretch. That means we've only got 2 more innings of tall tales to go today until we head for, mixing up our sports here, head for Churchill Downs for the home stretch. Maybe we can work some hockey in there somewhere, huh? Okay, next item on the card is Lebowski versus Boards. I think we all know who David Lebowski is. He's the parent of Asher Lebowski, and really a case that really tugs at your heartstrings. A poor 4-year-old kid died in the hospital. Lebowski filed a government claim. The government paid him $500,000. He'd like to file suit, but he can't get around our MMAA mandatory medical Mandatory Medical Malpractice Arbitration Act. So he has built a fire for the modification or the repeal of our MMAA, which is kind of passed from public view since the Easter Law. He got so interested in putting language in bills that would pay everybody war claims regardless of when they died. So this article appeared in today's paper, in today's Daily News. Health licensing boards haven't prosecuted a complaint in 6 years. Now that could either be really very good news or very bad news. It could be really good news because there haven't been no one did anything that was prosecution worthy, or it could be really bad news that no matter how bad the medical professional screws up, nobody's going to prosecute him. Well, I'll let you decide that after I finish reading some of this stuff here. Neither the Guam Board of Medical Examiners nor the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners have prosecuted a complaint against a licensee since 2015, according to documents filed in the Superior Court. Attorney Vanessa Williams last week opposed a motion to dismiss an August court order regarding both boards, filed by Deputy Attorney General Robert Weinberg. Williams is representing David Lebowski, whose 5-year-old son died at GMH in 2018. Lebowski, who has filed complaints against licensees with both boards, alleged earlier this year that the boards do not have rules governing the investigation of complaints against licensees. He petitioned the court to order them to adopt such rules. Weinberg has argued that both boards do have the rules in place. Supporting statements submitted in late October from Dr. Nathaniel Berg, chair of the Medical Examiners Board, and Mamie Balaja, chair of the Allied Health Board, outlined the informal process which the boards have adopted to resolve complaints. Statements from Berg and Balaja walk through the process from the time a complaint is received to an investigator being assigned, a hearing against the licensee held, and a final decision to disciplinary action assigned. But neither board has held a formal hearing for a complaint in 6 years. They've gone as far as attempting to resolve the complaint informally with the licensee and their lawyer, according to the statements. Quote, what I have described above is as far as any matters have ever gone since 2015. Statements from both Berg and Balaja read. According to the statements, the Attorney General's office used to investigate and prosecute complaints, but stopped doing so in May of 2015. Without that, proceeding to a hearing of the complaint requires the Department of Public Health and Social Services or the Health Professions Licensing Office to get private counsel. The Medical Examiners Board had to rely on public health on the licensing board to get legal services, Berg wrote, a task that had not been seriously attempted until recently and then not without difficulty. The Medical Examiners Board did not have legal counsel, he said. The Allied Health Board also had difficulties in securing legal services, Balaja wrote. The board continues to lack legal services to prosecute disciplinary complaints. Williams argued that this only indicated a need for rules to be adopted, and nothing less than a court order would compel them to do so. Despite the law unambiguously stating their primary responsibility and obligation to the boards is to protect the people, the boards feel they can continue to employ arbitrary process for the investigation of complaints that have allowed them to languish for years. Attorney Curtis Vandeveld, who represents former Guam psychiatrist Dr. Agner Pasatiempo, argued in September that his client had been unable to work for 2 years because of a drawn-out investigation by the medical board and several complaints against Pasatiempo alleging sexual misconduct. The boards mistake the procedures for bringing disciplinary action against their licensees as a substitute for their mandatory duties to investigate complaints, Williams argued in her objection. The Allied Health Examiners did have a subcommittee working on formal draft rules covering licensure, regulatory, and disciplinary processes, which would be accessible to the ordinary board member and layperson, according to Balaja's statement. The committee has had 60 meetings since 2012, 15 in 2021 alone. Although I cannot give a definitive date when the work group will consider the rules ready for public discussion, it is close, Balaja wrote. Berg said the Medical Examiners Board also intended to draft rules, but it will likely be a lengthy process. Balaja and Berg stated that their boards were made up of volunteers who received only $50 for regular meetings and were not compensated for subcommittee work. Drafting of any rules was in addition to any other work that the boards did. The process took considerable time, Berg said. It takes a commitment of time that all healthcare professionals rarely have, whether their community is in the midst of a pandemic or not. Now, there's an irony here, and that is that Vanessa Williams represents Lebowski, and she's saying, you know, they're just not doing this. They're not doing their rules. They're taking too long. This is the same Vanessa Williams that is the chair of the Cannabis Control Board that was supposed to have completed its rules 2 years ago, and they're not finished yet. So we have and this fits right in here, cannabis. What's another word? What's the street language for cannabis, the street word?
Marijuana, weed.
Starts with a P.
Pot.
Yeah, well, here we have the pot calling the kettle black, don't we? Yeah. So just standing back here and looking at this, you know, if you want to get things done in a lot of these agencies, you have to have counsel. And, you know, one of a lawyer's jobs is, when he sits with these boards, is to say, gentlemen or board members or commissioners, stop right there, because you got legal problems and you need the advice of counsel. You can't expect lay people to go merrily on their way and then all of a sudden know that they need a lawyer, because that's the difference between lay people and lawyers. Lawyers know when there's a legal matter involved, lay people don't. So to say, let these guys go forward, and if they need a lawyer, they can go out and hire one, is a recipe for success. Now, I was able to obtain a lawyer, as you were, a letter dated May 14th, 2015, to Mamie Balaja over the signature of Elizabeth Barrett Anderson that sheds a lot of light on this matter. Dear Dr. Balaja, on April 29, 2015, I met with the Guam Board of Allied Health Examiners, Vice Chair Dr. Gregory Miller, and the Director of the Department of Public Health and Social Services, Mr. James Gillen. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the nature and scope of the Attorney General's representation of the Allied Health Board in general, and the various cases involving Dr. Joel Joseph in particular. Now, Dr. Joseph sued lawyers, people from these boards, etc., and the case was decided last month. Joseph lost. The government won. The following is a summary of the topics of our conversation. Upon assuming office in January, I undertook an assessment of my office legal assistance and resources currently assigned to all government entities, including the various regulatory governmental boards and commissions. Through this assessment, I determined that my office representation of the Allied Health Board posed particular problems and challenges, given that we found ourselves acting in various legal capacities with respect to the board. As I discussed with Dr. Miller and Mr. Gillen, by statute, the obligation of the Attorney General's office to assist the board with legal counsel and advice on legal matters and questions that arise in the course of the board's administrative duties. Go back to what I just said a minute ago. The office also will represent the Allied Health Board and its members in any court action to which the board or its members have been named as a party. After a thorough review of the various administrative matters to which the OAG has therefore assisted the Allied Health Board in the execution of its duties and responsibilities, I have determined, however, that our role heretofore cannot and shall not extend to the investigation or prosecution of disciplinary complaints before the Allied Health Board. There you go, 2015. We aren't going to do this anymore. Take this job and shove it. I am hereby providing notice to the Allied Health Board that in its pending disciplinary proceeding against veterinarian Dr. Joel Jofus for office, Dr. Joel Joseph, the Office of the Attorney General is withdrawing as its disciplinary prosecutor. In addition to other considerations, our continuation in this role would place this office in an untenable conflict of interest in presenting the case, wherein certain assistant attorneys general may potentially be called as witnesses, having previously advised the board. Given our withdrawal as disciplinary prosecutor, we advise the board to secure an able replacement to prosecute this case in a timely manner, and as we have informed Dr. Miller and Mr. Gillen, the replacement may or may not be an attorney. That'd be great if they get a non-attorney to prosecute their disciplinary cases. In pursuit of its disciplinary responsibilities, the Allied Health Board is authorized to establish a budget to assist in carrying out such duties through the hiring of consultants for investigation and prosecution. The board's enabling statute, 10 GCA section 12803C14, permits the board to contract consultants for special needs of the board in the investigation of complaints, monitoring of a licensed person in terms of a violation of the Act, and other monitoring investigation. Further, section 12803I permits the board to appoint committees from its membership and may employ an executive secretary or director and other staff, including an adequate staff of investigators, to effectively perform its duties under the Act. It may also employ private counsel or its own full-time attorney. I advised Dr. Miller and Mr. Gillen that I would support any efforts initiated by the board to secure from the Guam legislature the necessary resources for such purposes, and I reiterate that support now. Further, with respect to the disciplinary matter before the board, I don't need to get into this, it's overcome by events. I hope I have been able to clarify and articulate my position with respect to my office legal assistance to and representation of the Allied Health Board. My decision with respect to not being able to provide investigative and prosecutorial assistance is not exclusive to the Allied Health Board, but will extend to all similar boards and commissions. Although our office will be limited in this regard, we stand ready to assist the board with legal advice and support it requires in fully assuming and fulfilling its administrative and enforcement functions and responsibilities. So there you go. The Attorney General said, no more, no mas, and pulled the rug out from under it. Now, putting myself in the place of these people on these boards and commissions, most of whom are not lawyers, they're doctors and allied health professionals, to say, well, you know, we're not going to help you anymore. You got to go out and find your own lawyer. This is something that most people really dread. I don't know how many times I get phone calls where people ask me, Bob, I've got this kind of a problem. Do you know who handles that kind of work? It just happens all the time. So, you don't want to get a real estate attorney to come in and handle a prosecution of an administrative law case. So this is saddling these boards and commissions, which already have enough to do, enough responsibility, with something that's really tough, because they ought to have counsel riding side saddle with them when they decide whether they want to discipline. Not decide, we're going to discipline, let's find a lawyer. It's just not a good system. Now, I've gone through the code, and I can give you an example of some examples of laws that require the Attorney General to provide various kinds of legal assistance. All of these appear in 10 GCA. There's section 12104 for the Commission of the Healing Arts and Licensures, which really kind of passed out of existence. But this is what the statute said. The Attorney General shall provide legal services to the Commission and the Board of Examiners. That's medical examiners, nurse examiners, dentistry, etc., without a fee. Then we've got section 12203I, Guam Board of Medical Examiners. It should also be assigned adequate legal counsel by the Office of Attorney General and or be authorized to employ private counsel or its own full-time attorney. And we've got dental examiners. The Attorney General shall represent without fee the Board of Examiners for Dentistry. And we've got allied health examiners. That's it should also be assigned adequate legal counsel by the Office of the Attorney General or be authorized to employ private counsel or its own full-time attorney. And the Guam Board of Social Work. We're regulating social work now. The director shall provide office space, staff, as you were. The Attorney General shall provide legal services to the board without fee. So the Attorney General is the lawyer for the government of Guam. These boards and agencies are part of the government of Guam. They perform a valuable function for the government of Guam. The Attorney General, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson, is a lawyer, and as I've remarked before, she's got all the lawyer's tools. She has a knife that's so sharp she can split hairs with it. She has a pair of dung-colored glasses which allow her to look 40 miles down the road and see every bad thing that can happen. And she's used those tools here to basically abandon these boards. You know, if the problems are as they say they are, I would think that she would appoint someone to take a leadership role to make sure that these boards and commissions had competent counsel, even if that counsel was not an assistant attorney general. Instead of saying, we're not going to do this anymore, we're not even going to prosecute Mr. Wise Owl. You're on your own, guys. And as a result, we have a headline that says, health licensing boards haven't prosecuted a complaint in 6 years. So there you go. Congratulations, Elizabeth Barrett Anderson. Okay, let's head for Churchill Downs.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Half a day. Konnichiwa.
Patois. Ciao. Enter for a chance to win the 76 Circle K World Cuisine Giveaway. Be one of 3 lucky winners to win a passport of free food from around the world at over 15 different local restaurants. Just stop by any 76 Circle K, purchase $35 or more in fuel to get an entry form. Drive by today and taste the world with 76 Circle K's World Cuisine Giveaway. Visit 76circlekguam.com for more details. Some conditions apply. Circle K, take it easy.
Churchill Downs in Louisville. This is the home stretch of Tall Tales. That means I got about 7 more minutes to go before the end of the show today. I'm going to go back to John B. versus Clint. And you'll recall that yesterday I covered this. I have got a hold of a copy of a letter from John Beneventi, the general manager of GPA, to Vice Speaker Tina Rose Munya Barnes, asking her to take the necessary action to get a public hearing for Bill 213-36, which Beneventi says is critical to the future operations of the Power Authority. There was also a little tete-a-tete between John B. and Clint in yesterday's Post, but today the Post came out with a more full-blown articulation of John B. versus Clint, and it goes like this. The Guam Power Authority has responded to Clint Rigel saying that recent statements about the Ukadu power plant are incorrect or contain misinformation. Rigel announced on October 26th that he had asked the public auditor and attorney general to look into the Ukadu project over perceived issues with changes in the project. The public auditor will later state that the matter is out of his jurisdiction, while the Office of Attorney General remarked that a review of the senator's request is underway. The Korea Electric Power Company and Korea East-West Power Consortium won the bid on the Ukadu project and signed a power purchase agreement with GPA in late 2019. The selection proved controversial as KEWP was the project manager for the now defunct Cabers 3 and 4 power plant, which suffered a catastrophic explosion in August of 2015. A lot of things blew up in 2015, huh, Jose? The consortium created a local company for the project, Guam Ukadu Power LLC. A significant concern for Rigel is the project's shift from major source permitting to minor source permitting. The changes come with a shorter permitting timeline, but it also means that the power plant facility in Ukadu will have to forego 65 megawatts of reserve diesel generation. Instead, the plan is to now install 41 megawatts of reserve units miles away at Cabras, near where Guam's existing main generators reside, which is also close enough to Jose Middle School. The GPA is pursuing a waiver from local law that prevents the construction of fossil fuel generation facilities in excess of 1 megawatt within 1,500 feet of a school. So now we know exactly where the battle lines are drawn here. We didn't yesterday with the first Post article. The Consolidated Commission on Utilities and Public Utilities Commission, GPA's oversight bodies, approved the change in the project. In the October 26 release, Rigel said that Guam Ukadu Power was unable to obtain the major source permit, so GPA, the CCU, and the PUC opted to split the power plant. This is one of the October 26 statements the GPA calls incorrect. The procurement did not dictate the type of permit required for the project. GPA presumed the bidder would pursue minor source permitting based on the construction timelines. The Ukadu plant could have been permitted under major source, but would have taken longer simply due to process defined by U.S. EPA. The minor source permit process is generally shorter, GPA stated. The discussion to seek a particular permit was based on several factors, including meeting consent decree deadlines with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. The utility also said that it was incorrect to call a change a major departure from both the scope of work and cost of the original contract, which Rigel stated. The core of the contract remains 198 megawatts combined cycle power, which was also the intent of the procurement, according to GPA. It was in everyone's best interest to complete the plant as early as possible so that fuel savings would flow earlier to ratepayers, GPA stated. The 41 megawatt reserve diesel location to Cabras is more a physical site relocation in order to, as expeditiously as possible, get the core 198 megawatt combined cycle completed. The installation of the 41 megawatt at Cabras does come with additional costs, $2 million in fixed annual operations and maintenance costs, and a variable operating and maintenance costs of 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour of net production when used by GPA, with utility providing the fuel. But these reserve diesel units are a small part of the contract and less than 5% of the cost, according to GPA. The relocation of the reserve units and change in dispatchability allows GPA to retire aged and costlier units. GPA also stated that this issue was thoroughly vetted by both CCU and PUC, and the changes were acceptable to US EPA, which resulted in avoiding penalties. The Ukadu plant was supposed to be up and running by October 2022, but the changes and various delays resulting from permitting, pandemic factors, and other constraints, the new date for the power plant to begin operating is April 2024. So I guess what we have here then is GPA called a play, got to the line of scrimmage, called an audible, and Rigel stopped playing the game and started being the referee and wants to penalize JPA 15 yards.
Yard line.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the end of the show today. I didn't get to homework, but we close the show by saying, let's go, Brandon!
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
Defending the mandate, I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. The Justice Department telling the Federal Appeals Court people will die if it permits an order temporarily halting the president's vaccine mandate for private sector employees to become permanent. The White House still pushing the vaccine.
Our job that we see here in the administration is to make sure that these vaccines are readily available, that they're free, right, and that we make it as easy as possible for people to get vaccinated, and that we message that out. And so that's our focus.
Deputy White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, Monday was the last day for federal workers and contractors to get their shots in order to meet a vaccine deadline later this month. Los Angeles is now requiring proof of vaccination to enter restaurants, gyms, and entertainment facilities, triggering protests Monday.
Demonstrators were loud and deliberate in their message Monday at Grand Park in downtown Los Angeles. They will not be forced to vaccinate against COVID-19. Thousands descended on the park in the shadow of LA City Hall, carrying signs with defiant slogans like "I'm not a lab rat" and "I will not comply," and waving American flags. The protests, dubbed the March for Freedom, drew people from all walks of life, but especially passionate were people who work for the city of Los Angeles as they face down a December 18th deadline to vaccinate or potentially lose their jobs.
Reporter Laura Diaz of Fox 11 in L.A. A bit of a mystery surrounding California's Governor Gavin Newsom. He hasn't been seen publicly in 8 days. His last public appearance was the day he received his coronavirus booster shot. The spokesman says the governor has been dealing with family obligations. Back on Earth, 4 crew members from the International Space Station, 2 NASA astronauts and 1 each from France and Japan, splashing down late last night in the SpaceX crew capsule in the Gulf of Mexico.